later that year, I closed 4 deals from YouTube. And
Really?
that was also when I had more time to devote to it, because it does take time. But
Yes.
like anything, it's what you put into it. And, you know, you for me, there was a lot of learning, involved, because you know, I think what is so powerful about YouTube is that you're able to show people who aren't from the area, who know nothing about your town, what it's really like to live in a place. And, no Instagram post, no Facebook post is really going to be able to capture you as a person and build that rapport with a potential client even before you've met.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about yourself, how you got into this business,
Yeah.
and would any of your kids ever work in this business?
Yeah, no, they're too smart. All right, so how I got into this business. So my background, I went to school for business with a concentration in marketing. And I was in the digital software space for 10 years. I was in the tech world. So I sold marketing technology, and I worked with, some of the largest names and, a lot of retailers. So Neiman Marcus, Home Depot, Five Below, a lot of big companies that are recognizable, and I helped them with their digital marketing strategy. And there were various, I worked for various companies within this that all did different things, but all related to digital marketing. And in 2022, I was at 140% to my goal. So I was an account manager. So I had a little bit of sales, a sales component to my role, but I really just made sure that they were utilizing the technology and were happy with everything. And I was at 140% to my goal. And I get on a Zoom call with with my boss, and the president of the company was on the Zoom. And I'm like, this is weird, because had just been acquired by Salesforce, or not SAP rather. And so she said, we're not sure if you have something personal going on at home. We know you have 2 young kids, so we're not sure if that's impacting your work performance.
At 140%.
140%. And I was in complete shock. And as any, and she said, per the conversations that we had on this date, and they were all made up dates, every single one of them. I looked back at my calendar. I'm like, did I misinterpret something that somebody was saying? And they had just been acquired. So they wanted to, get their own people in there and pay them less than what they were paying me. And they used my kids as an excuse, when I never, ever let my kids impact my work performance whatsoever. And
of course, in real estate, that's a violation.
Oh, I mean, it was a violation,
Every violation. Yes.
And I was because I've always, I'm a really hard worker, and I take my job really seriously. And it's hard when you put your heart and soul into something, and for someone to say you're not doing a good job when you did, and so that was looking back, it was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. And it gave me the push to go into real estate full time. And I always knew I was going to be in real estate because it interested me. My mom is a real estate attorney, still practicing. So I always enjoyed it. And I got the real estate bug a couple years earlier. Before then, I just became fascinated with real estate investing. And, we bought a couple multifamilies, and it was one of the first things that I had ever really been passionate about. And so in 2022, everything with my job happened in April. And so I spent the rest of the first couple months, just figuring out my systems, building profiles, making sure that my name was visible on all of these major platforms. And in my first full, I think I sold like 4 million in that year, like the remaining part of that year. But in my first full year, I sold $15 million with no mentor, no guidance at all, really. And I sold $75 million. I sold 75 million in my first 3 full years in real estate. And yeah, and I've grown this business to, I don't have a lot of agents that work for me. I haven't really focused on building that, and I don't know if I want to. I think real estate will always be a really big part of me in my life, but to be determined. I'm still kind of figuring out the direction that I want to take things.
Well, that's good. I mean, it sounds like, I had this similar criteria of what I wanted to do. I mean, for me, I started in advertising in New York City as an art director
I
slash
love it.
marketing. And then I moved to Boston, 16 years in Manhattan, 5 years in Boston. Then I moved to New Hampshire 20 years ago. I was still doing marketing and didn't know anything about real estate at all, which is why I didn't know what seasonal meant when I moved into my cabin in January. It's like single pane windows. So, you know, I think what we do, our real life experience, giving that to the real estate experience is helpful. So, I mean, but you did something that most people aren't capable or don't know how to do right, which is really, you started off right away making sure that you're visible because
Yep.
nobody knows who you are. For me, my first listing was Waterfront, so I created waterfrontagent.net
Mhm.
because .com wasn't available. Many years later, I bought the .com. It was for
Yeah.
sale for $20,000. I got it down to 7,000.
Wow.
But most agents don't spend that kind of money on a domain name. But if I didn't, you would understand that you
Well,
lose.
I
You
own
lose those,
probably 100 different domain names, so I get
I
it.
have 40, 40. And I keep getting. It's like I tailor them. You probably understand this. I tailor them. I wasn't going to do michaeltravis.com because who am I? I don't know. So I did waterfrontagent.net, then .com, then lakefront, then oceanfront, then riverfront, then Lake Estates because that's a
Hmm.
European. But from the standpoint of why that's valuable for clients, how is that valuable for clients that you can think of?
Well, it's exposure, right? Like I think about, if I now, especially with AI and content creation, the opportunities are endless with what you can do. And if I had a $10 million listing, or even whatever, I have the ability to to buy a domain name, create a unique landing page, and drive traffic to that landing page. And it's all an algorithm. There's a science to it. And really, what I'm building with my business is getting my site to rank as high as I can. And the more eyes that are on my site versus Zillow, the more eyeballs are going to get on my clients' listings.
Yep, absolutely. So now, of course, AI. And now YouTube. You use a lot of YouTube.
I did, and YouTube's interesting because I worked for a brokerage right after I left the corporate world, and I said to them, I think I'm going to create a YouTube channel, and they rolled their eyes at me, and I didn't
Really?
last very long there. But later that year, I closed 4 deals from YouTube. And
Really?
that was also when I had more time to devote to it, because it does take time. But
Yes.
like anything, it's what you put into it. And, you know, you, for me, there was a lot of learning, involved, because you know, I think what is so powerful about YouTube is that you're able to show people who aren't from the area, who know nothing about your town what it's really like to live in a place. And no Instagram post, no Facebook post is really going to be able to capture you as a person and build that rapport with a potential client even before you've met. So, for example, I'll never forget this. I live on kind of a main road, and I was outside sweeping or something, and I made was laughing or something. I made a noise, and someone walking by said, "Wait, are you Molly?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "I've been watching all of your videos. I know that, you have two little boys. I know your dad passed away, and I know that this and and she said, "I was going to call you to buy to when we bought our house in, last month, and I was going to use you, but I couldn't because of X, Y, and Z, whatever." That's aside, besides the point, but
She remembered you.
she remembered me, and I built rapport with her without meeting her. She knew me. She knew my story. She knew that I was a real person, and she remembered me. And so when I think about YouTube, I think, it's, yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. I mean, I also learned a lot about video editing, and I'm technical. So I like learning that process and doing it myself because I did outsource it for a while. I just wasn't always happy with the results. But, like anything, it's what you put into it. And I would love to get to a point where I can find a more automated way to do it. And it's on the roadmap. But right now, I'm kind of working on building my digital presence in other ways.
All right. Now, so AI, of course, is becoming, well, insane, actually. Now, I have a whole series of funny AI things I've done relating to real estate. But as an example, before I met this client, we were going to look at 19 acres of land in about a foot and a half of snow. And, this is my first meeting. So we met for breakfast first. And I said, look, I already did the showing. I said, what are you talking about? And I did this Sora AI thing where I'm talking to these two people, chest high in snow. And I put in the prompts. I said, well, here's Crystal Lake. It's this is, 500 feet of frontage and this, and there's penguins in the background and polar bears on Crystal Lake. But it was a funny way of introducing me to them. But it's also related to real estate, because it was a real lake. And so, but the scary part is that I could do it.
Yeah.
With AI, that when I started was with Sora. I don't know if you're familiar with Sora. Sora started, all they took was a picture like this. They didn't even have my bald spot, but apparently they could see through that. And I didn't even write the script. I just do whatever. In 5 minutes, it's a video. That part is scary. But I also use it. I mean, I have one where I'm selling penguins to an ice house on Lake Winnipesaukee. So, I mean,
That's awesome.
those are, but I haven't forayed into using AI. I mean, other than for helping create listings and things like that, into the world of further into real estate, other than you can say, please, improve this copy with SEO hashtags for Facebook, things like that. And that's helpful,
Yeah.
But it's only helpful if you actually edit it with your words sometimes.
Totally. And I think that as more people start using it in that way, I think that the algorithms are going to get more strict and realize that a lot of this information is not accurate.
Yes.
You have to have someone fact checking things. And this is sort of relevant, but not, this is relevant. So homes.com, they have been, their whole thing was they spent $1 billion in marketing. And, you can tell in certain ways, but they have one thing that they've focused on is having these almost like neighborhood guides on their web pages and what they've been on their website, and they've been having local agents. They would call a local agent who's done business in that area and say, hey, can you give me more information, what are the top 5 things to do, in this town. And I was asked to do that for a particular town, and she said, we want to look at this area, which is called X. And it wasn't the name, it was of this area. I don't know. And that happened with 2 different areas right around me. So they made all of this content, made this in very, like, they paid videographers, photographers to come down to the areas, take really good images, videos, drone footage, and they couldn't even get the name of the neighborhoods right.
Yeah.
And that to me is like, it is just a huge, that is, there has to be a human component to it. And if there's not, it's useless. It's probably hurting them from an SEO standpoint to have all of this content that says it's an area that it's not.
So I did talk to another agent. This is interesting. He actually on his own website has a bot that answers a lot of questions, just like a Google thing specific to his area. Now that's a good use of AI, I think. And then we can go in and correct things and, like what's the best beach in town, whatever. But it also saves time for an agent because a lot of questions can be answered.
Yeah.
But it's still going to his own website to do it, SEOs and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think like with anything, it's going to take it time to learn, those specifics. But yeah.
So you have a very good background from a technical standpoint, SEOs and that kind of stuff, which far exceeds, first of all, I find a lot of agents, it's a part-time job, not their full-time job. And, it takes 40 hours here to get a real estate license. My wife just got a hair license. It's 1,500 hours. So,
wow.
Yeah. So in that case, for 10 years, I got a free haircut. Now I get a free haircut plus tips. But it's getting easier for her to do my hair. And so, but one of the things that, because of this technology is growing so fast, what do you find in the future is going to, you touch on some of it, it's going to make real estate agents relevant?
I think that it's really going to separate the people who not only are in it full time, but I think and we've already seen the shift from a brokerage level, right? I have Tides Real Estate Group, which is affiliated with Real Broker, and Real Broker just acquired Remax. It was a $800 billion acquisition or something crazy. And I think that a lot of these, I've seen it firsthand, a lot of these mom and pop brokerages are going under or being sold because you can't do it all. And it makes sense I'm with Real Broker because of the technology. And from a legal perspective, I don't want to, I like that from a liability perspective, it makes me comforted. There are a lot of crazy people out there. And, I think having the backing of a larger company is huge. But, if you're not focusing on your digital presence in the year of 2026 and you're still just praying and mailing out postcards, I think it's really creating a much larger gap in the industry. So, but it's hard to say what's going to happen. I know that a lot of agents have turned in their licenses or let their licenses lapse recently, but I don't know. I think it's hard to say.
Well, when I started 20 years ago, I sent one postcard, and people didn't think about how you do this. So my first listing was a Waterfront. I live on water. I like water. I like waterfront people. So I just sent a postcard to everyone whose address was not in town, right? On the text card in Northwood, a little tiny town. And for 5 years, I was getting, because it said, Michael Travis knows Northwood like the back of his yard, and you're seeing my lake. And it was focused to waterfront people because most of the people who don't live there have a waterfront. So, but it worked for like 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
But that's because it was relevant,
Yep.
targeted, niche, and I think a lot of these big and of course at the time I was with Coldwell Banker, and they have you got to you have your postcards, yeah, but it's the content of the postcards that matter, not the fact that it's a postcard.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and I'll say the same thing. Any digital thing needs to be just as focused, targeted, relevant. And what makes it relevant is that I always say I try to help your real estate. I take real life experience for your real estate experience. So, because, you know, I have a real life, but of course I was in advertising for so many years and I have more stories than anybody. But also I have a tie to so many businesses that you do that I can have a conversation about anybody's business. And it doesn't matter who they are. Nobody's going to intimidate me, with their success. I always feel you're as successful as your five closest friends. But someone told me that. I don't know if that's true.
Yeah.
But so it sounds you're definitely somebody who says you have to look forward but you have to look forward faster now because of the changes. Okay?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I think one of the things that I realized when I first got started was that I wanted to have my own website. I didn't want, because a lot of these brokerages give one for free, but I wanted to promote, if I'm going to spend this much time to promote myself, I wanted to own it. And so, and I've had a few different, and if anyone goes to my site, hopefully you're always in the process of updating it, but I have a lot of plans and I'm using AI to help me build out really specific targeted landing pages with data and facts that are going to be relevant for the people who are looking in those areas. So, I think that having a digital presence is huge. And I mean, it's not just huge, it's critical at this point. If you don't have a Google business profile, you're already way behind, and I had a referral deal close recently, and it was it was validating because the person came through my system. They had signed up for my new, they had signed up on my site somehow, and back in October. And probably 3 months ago, she said, "Hi, Molly, we're ready to buy." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, well, awesome. Where are you looking?" And she said, "Amherst, Massachusetts." So I live on the coast and of Massachusetts and Rhode Island. Amherst is not close. It's like 3 hours away. So I was obviously not going to go there, help. I wouldn't be able to help her. And so I found an agent who was able to help her. And a couple weeks ago, the agent said, "Hi, she's buying a $1.2 million house. Would you be okay with 25%?" And of course, I was ecstatic, right? It's money that I hadn't planned for. But the crazy part about it is that I was able to track down the source of where that lead came from. And she came from ChatGPT.
Oh,
So
you're doing a lot of presence with ChatGPT.
no, because it's not a search engine. Now
Oh, so she was plugged in. I need an agent for whatever,
she
and
needed an agent, and I don't know what she, and I probably could figure it out, but I never looked into seeing what she actually searched for. But when we go back to talking about when we're talking about having our online presence, the more names and the more places you are, the more of an authority figure. These search engines now, you have ChatGPT, you have complexity, Claude. There are six of major ones. And so now it's almost like it's a new age of searching, right?
Search. Yeah. 'Cause it used to be Google. And now
Google,
Google
Bing,
is,
Yahoo, but
yeah, but now Chat GPT is moving faster.
it,
So now I think because of all the technology, well, first of all, I found a shift when Zillow started coming around, and people would look at Zillow and then they were thinking that's the value of the property was estimates and that kind of stuff, which has nothing to do with anything, especially waterfronts. But did you find that this suddenly became a shift with Realtor.com, Zillow becoming more prevalent, that people became experts, right? Buyers became experts. And now you can search, oh, they only paid, 500,000 for this property 10 years ago. So why is it worth $1.5 million? Whatever. So it's like you run into that kind of stuff. But what I'm also finding is a lot of scams coming through.
mhm.
I've had 5 of them this week. Land listings,
Land's a big one.
especially vacant listings. Now I'm putting out there, I have an active one right now. I just told him, I said, well, the real owner doesn't really want to sell it. So, but he sent a good counterfeit driver's license.
Wow.
This is, I mean, with the correct address, and he had changed information of what he looked like.
And you
He
knew
said,
that he was a scammer going into it?
I know that when somebody calls and says, found you on Zillow and I want you to list my land,
Yes, yes, yep, yep.
whatever. But it's just now so prevalent. I mean, there's ways of finding the real owner. I mean, the town doesn't have that information, but it's my feeling that a lot of agents just ignore it. I feel like you need to let the owner know that his identity's been breached, and they will appreciate you forever. So
Hmm.
I try to do that. And then you can file it with the police, you file it with the FBI and all that kind of stuff. But then my fear is like, well, what if because what I don't know, it's like, well, if I tell the guy, well, I've already notified the police, the FBI, are they going to start targeting me? Because they know who I am,
Hmm.
right? They went to my website, they know where I'm from, whatever. They have my phone number. So but the land thing is thing. Now I'm putting out there what I call the LSP,
Hmm.
which is almost like LSD, which is the land scam plan. My belief that if there's any sort of a lien on your property with no mortgage, they're going to target you. So if you work with title company or whatever, the smallest lien of some sort,
Yep,
$10,000 loan, whatever,
yep,
that it might actually help.
yep.
And in New Hampshire, don't know about there, all the county registries have a thing that if you sign up, you will be notified immediately if anybody is checking your deed.
I don't know though, because we have a house in Waterville Valley, New Hampshire, and I was on a Facebook group, and someone was just saying that this exact same thing happened to them. Yeah, it's scary.
Well, by the time somebody's looking at the deed, now, of course, there's a lot of reasons somebody looks at a deed, right? We
Hmm.
look for it. We go to the registry to verify that information. So it's a relatively new program,
Yeah,
by the way.
yeah, and I think like going back to AI. There's so many scary things that can happen with it. Using AI to comb through all of the deeds to there you can do anything. But my hope is that the good that people do, the good will outweigh the bad. And I'm of the mind, I believe that the change is happening, right? Like there's nothing that any of us can do to stop it. And so I, as a business owner, as a mom, as someone who's really engaged with our community, I'm using it for good and using it to help our community save money, or to help our little village make a new website that, is there are so many different ways that you can use it. But yeah, I think it's just one thing at a time.
So one thing that I see, that's another one where somebody says, "Hey, my husband and I are really interested in your property. We want to get a little bit more information. We'd like to do a Zoom call."
That's the big one. That one's had a, yeah. And I
Yeah,
say
and so
nope. I say
no,
nope. I won't do it. I have to have a phone call with you first.
we have a full contact information, but that's happening now. I don't know. I mean, that's of course targeted to us to get into our computers and
Yes.
things like that.
Yep.
And they're getting better at it, but it's still, I mean, we're kind of also protecting our clients, I think, from,
Totally.
I don't know
Yep.
how that goes. And there's even sometimes, we want to do the best of promoting somebody's property, and we do all these wonderful virtual tours on the inside of the house. That means anybody can look at somebody's house from the inside to know where to go, especially the 3D, whatever, the 3D videos and things like that. So it's just kind of people need to see it, and bad people need to see it too.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
kind of a new
Double-edged
reality.
sword. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we're going to find changes with that. I mean, do you see that something like you have to sign up and, be verified to even look? Well, right now you can't, you have to sign a buyer agent agreement even just to look at a property,
Yep.
you know? In practice, that's not necessarily done, but it needs to be. So is there any sort of story that stands out? Because we have many stories that really pointed to, I mean, there's funny stories, there's scary stories, all kinds of stuff,
Yep.
creepy stories, you know, especially targeted at single women agents. Oh, meet me at this property and, whatever. But what would be a story that you tell about what you do that,
A buyer, you said?
let's say a buyer?
Oh, geez. This is not an exciting one, but it's, no, a
Well,
buyer.
first of all, we're psychologists as well, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah, 1,000%. So this was going to be like my piece of advice that I would give to buyers. It's not necessarily a fun story, but, with buying a home or selling a home, there are so many emotions that are involved. And I don't think people realize, I feel like agents have a bad reputation for the most part. A lot of people hate agents. They hate, there's a stigma about real estate agents, unfortunately. But one thing,
Forgetting that we only get paid if we sell something, but we're doing a lot of work for nothing. But they would have
totally.
no problem paying an attorney that says you have to pay me a retainer before I do anything,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Along with the marketing
Yep.
and everything there.
You hit the nail on the head. We are psychologists in every point of this person's journey, whether they're buying or selling. I think with buyers, they're I've had so many clients who are so disappointed when they don't, if they were the second bid, or, they lost out on this house, because of XYZ. And I've had clients who call me sobbing, because they just feel so defeated. And what I say to them is that every single time I've seen this exact same situation play out, the next house they find is always much better. And they look back and say, thank God we didn't buy that house. Thank God that didn't work out, because then we wouldn't be where we are now. And it happens every time, And then with sellers, oh, there's a little there's a little more, there are more reasons that someone's selling. So, I've had situations where I didn't know it I had the buyers and didn't know it at the time, but the seller was a severe alcoholic and didn't realize that she had to have the entire place, packed and ready to cleaned out by the closing date. She thought that she had 3 more weeks to stay in the house, so it's no two transactions are alike. And, you know, I,
I had one alcoholic seller who I could never get a hold of because he was online gaming on top of that. And I went to the house and he had tenants in the house who didn't want to move. And he was there with a leaf blower blowing bubbling stuff coming out of the ground on a waterfront with a well
oh,
nearby.
ah,
And I'm going, what is this? He goes, well, so, I mean, so he knew his septic was not even remotely a septic. It was like a washer drum.
yeah,
And then while the buyers, we're under agreement, it's like, so I said, look, I have to now explain to the buyer that it is a failed septic. There's no way that this is a remote, and that in fact, what you're doing is violating everything. And you got raw sewage going into the whatever. And then the tenants wouldn't leave, and they said they saw the buyer. Said, well, about the fire. I said, fire. So then I talked to the seller, going, can you tell me about the fire? He goes, oh, yeah, we had a fire there, and ProServe went there, and then the buyer's going, well, was it a bad fire? I said, I don't know what a good fire is unless you're having s'mores with it, but and they still bought it.
see,
They
that's
had an
crazy.
inspection. So no, but then they still bought it and they were gutting it. They were planning on gutting it. Well, when they gutted it, that's when they discovered that all of the framing was charred. So now we're talking about a structural problem. And then they called and they said, well, we're going to sue you because, you didn't say it was a bad fire. I'm going, there's no such thing as a good fire, but at least you knew there was a fire, you know? But I mean, they still closed and they, whatever, but still that's kind of stuff. And here's a math thing that I think you probably have heard. Well, the house sold for 10,000 less than I expected. So I want you to reduce your commission by 1%. So that $10,000 from a $400,000 sale, right, is nothing, right? But they want us to reduce our commission 25%.
Yeah. They accepted the price. Yeah. Yeah. No,
Yeah. So anyway, yeah. That's the thing. And by the way, how much have you paid so far for all the marketing, the videos, and the drones, whatever? Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
So, and we become tourist agents,
Yeah.
like a tour guide, right? Because we're paid so well,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the parts that, I've taken a big step back, I would say this year, because, I did, let's say, the number is irrelevant, right? Like, I was really busy last year and I busted my butt to do it. But that also comes at a price, and I'm not the type of person where, if the carpets need to be torn up, I'm right there ripping them out. And, I've painted walls. I'm painting a wall at a house that I'm listing right, I was there yesterday doing it. I take my job really seriously, but I've also been burned. I've had some really traumatic, really awful transactions that just make you question humanity, like
Well, but the other thing, even just what you're saying, you're painting their walls.
yeah.
Are they paying you to paint their walls?
No.
No. And so we're doing that as a service, and they expect that we do that, and that part is wrong. I mean, I had a client that,
I
yeah,
fully get that.
and yeah, and the thing is, and then someone bought the boat with it. We're not getting commission, but if they sold the boat
Yeah.
with, they would have to pay 10% commission. And I had a situation where it was a big commercial property, but the owner had 3 LLCs, but he never, every year you have to like update your LLC, and he didn't do it because he didn't know how to. And one was about to be dissolved. Now in New Hampshire, I can fix anybody's LLC, which is crazy, and I did that, but there's time and there's cost. And he felt, well, you're selling. He thought that was part of what I'm supposed to be. I said, no, if I didn't do it, we would not be selling. You can't sell it. And what are you going to do? You would have to hire an attorney or somebody to do it. And then he wanted, to maybe to be a POA. I'm like, I'm not going to, can't be your POA. And then in the end, he said, oh, you guys saved me so much money. It's like, but you were.
That's the
So
part that, I genuinely care about.
there's service. It is, we service our clients.
You service your clients, but then like the people that I helped and went above and beyond for, it was, an elderly woman who, didn't have any help nearby, or,
Yeah.
many different, I could give you so many different examples, but a lot of them did really like burn me. And, I think that the more you do transaction wise, the more, it puts you out there. And that's the hard part about real estate, is that, you have to have your face out there. You're
Yeah.
promoting yourself, but that comes at a cost. For example, I have a billboard in town, and it's an updated photo, and it has my company name on there. And I was out to dinner with my kids a couple weeks ago, and the restaurant was right down the street from the billboard. And my license plate, we were right near my car, and my license plates is Tides. I don't know how I got that license plate, but so it said Tides. And then I hear these two women walking by. They look at me, and I smile, and they didn't really give me anything back. And then I hear them talking, and they said, well, she doesn't look anything like that picture. Are you kidding me? And I'm just like, these.
And that's what they're talking about. Yeah.
And yeah, it was a Friday night. I was with my kids. My hair was up, whatever. Like, but it's a hard game. It's a hard business,
So you could go back to those ladies in the restaurant and say, hey, do you like this look better? Is it better?
Yeah, I was just like, and I'm getting better about not, just brushing it off, but it gets to you at a certain point, and
Yeah.
anyway.
Well, I'm self-deprecating. And
I
I
am,
learned, I learned a long time ago, you want to say something negative about yourself before they say it behind your back.
and I'm the same way. Like I said, I wasn't looking my best, right? Like, but it's just, yeah, I'm being a lot more selective about the people that I work with. you know,
My license plate is buy sell, which I don't know how I got that way. Because it either means I sell stocks, drugs, or real estate. I chose to leave both. So, but everyone remembers it, And so actually someone else tried to get buy sell, and they did a different version. They just did BY and then, S E. It wasn't buy sell anymore. I mean, mine's BUYS. So it's the way it is. So, which means that, if you're going to be pulled over, they'll remember. And I learned you can't make the joke. Well, yeah, it's like I either sell drugs or stock to the cop, Yeah, I either sell drugs, stocks, or real estate. They don't appreciate that. Yeah. So one of my kind of unique stories is I was at a closing. I hadn't arrived yet. It was like 2 minutes out, minute out, and I get a call from the front desk saying the seller just said that they need 2 checks because her husband beats her.
Oh.
And that was my seller. It's like, okay. I said, did they come in the same car? But you can deal with. I mean, I lived in Manhattan for 16 years, in Boston 5 years. I saw everything, but I was never a victim of an assault until I moved here from the ex-boyfriend of my client, who said I was in his house. Well, it not only was not his house, he wasn't the boyfriend, and he wasn't supposed to be there. Well, he showed up late, whatever. Anyway, so it's like, I couldn't believe that the only bodily injury I had was from a real estate experience. I thought I was in advertising in New York City. I thought, I saw everything. I didn't get hit.
Well, when I had a transaction, and the agent and I were at the inspection together, so we had a lot of time to kill, and we started chatting, and she was like, how long have you been in it? And I hadn't been in it as long as her, and she said, oh, you haven't seen anything. She said, I've seen death. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, she represented the buyer, and it was an elderly couple, and they walked in for the final walkthrough, and the gentleman's car was still there, which she thought was odd. And she walked in and she heard the shower running and called, didn't hear anything. They both committed suicide, and the issue was that they didn't want to sell their house. They wanted to die in the house. And they both, yeah. And the person who was the buyer was this big burly construction guy, and he just ran out, didn't, obviously was traumatized from it, but the family supposedly was forcing them to sell, and they didn't want to sell, and they wanted to die in that house. So
Wow. Was there a closing?
there was not. Nope.
Well, I had a situation where, so it was a multi-unit commercial kind of property. There was a lot of tenants, and the lender wanted to see, actually the lender was being ridiculous. Said, well, we want to see every single unit, which was fine in the beginning, but one of the tenants had literally been there for 15 years. He never, I don't know how often he even took a shower. He definitely was an alcoholic, because he didn't drive, so his meals were at the Cumberland Farms, which, there's just so many meals there, and there were bags and bags of empty cans and whatever. But I had to show it with the seller or the buyer, and the buyer came in. They were kind of freaky out, and I said, "Look, I spent after they left, I just sat with him and I talked to him, because he hadn't had anybody talk to him in the time. I mean, I'm not afraid of that, but it's like, and he really was just genuinely a nice guy, but he was just, he's just kind of lost in his ways. And then later on, the lender wanted to look at specific units, one of which was that unit. I didn't want him to look at that unit because it was disgusting. And I said, look, legally, I can't let anyone in if the tenant doesn't want somebody to come in. I said, but here's another unit that's even better, whatever. So I then get this phone call, and so we did that, whatever. I get this phone call from the son, and he said, so my father will not be there, anymore. He's being very, and I said, what are you talking about? And see, he died. So if I had taken that lender into that unit, we would have walked into a dead body. And that could have, I don't know, affected. Now, from the buyer standpoint, I said, it's unfortunate, but now we can clean up that apartment, and because it was way undervalued and that kind of stuff. And I said, but it's because he said, this is somebody that needs to be in rehab, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But he was harmless. He wasn't suicidal. He just died because he was in such. Well, I mean, those are the things that now in terms of my life, you're young and you didn't really have a mentor, it seems, but you were smart and that kind of stuff. My mentor has been in the business since 1967. And so I fast tracked into this business, and I'm the only person that she actually co-listed a property with, because she saw that I wasn't just some guy. I had my whole life in marketing and whatever in the background. Mm-hmm. But my fourth transaction was fraud within the company. And it was so valuable, her insights, because she has seen everything. She has seen the suicides. Yep. She has seen the owner there with a woman who was not his wife. It's like, hello. And she taught me something. Well, she's taught me many things. Her name is Kathy Young. So, I can't speak highly enough. And she said, you will always get people basically who are scream and yell and they're whatever. And she doesn't care, It's like, and so she would, as they're yelling and screaming, like it's going to make any difference, right? She would stop and say, well, okay, are you done? Do you feel better? Which of course puts all the control back to her,
Mm-hmm.
And okay, you can continue, whatever. Are you finished? I find that to be, good advice. Now, my time was in advertising. I work with every type of person in the world, and you learn from all that. And in this business, you will also learn, be exposed. You have to be safe and that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody can believe our stories.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, my daughter wants me to write a book. Well, it's like, well, now that we have even this podcast, it transcribes it, so I can, it's like
Yep.
you have ChatGPT, and I got whatever that for me to type it. Of course, I'm old enough that I took typing class.
I did too.
No, but I'm old enough that I was the only guy in the class. It wasn't a required class. We didn't have computers.
Mm-hmm.
My motivation is that I was the only guy in the class, but I also spent $10,000 on a Mac in 1987 because I knew I would need to. I was only making 16,000. So, and now in this business, I'm one of the few that did that.
Mm-hmm.
When I started a drone business early on,
Love it.
and so but the technology is, I mean, we've talked about this, is changing so fast, and you have to be, you have to understand it. There was an agent I worked with who actually said he decided he didn't want to do it. So, I don't know, this internet stuff, it's just not going to have any value. I'm going, what? Because he wouldn't go to a showing because it was the rain. It was raining. I said, there's a showing. I said, you can't drive in the rain. I'm from Michigan. I can drive in anything. I learned to drive in the snow with two-wheel drive.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
is there any advice that you would give to somebody who's thinking about going into this business?
If you have no
Besides, don't.
yeah,
That's the answer.
I would say think twice if you don't have an interest in digital marketing,
Yeah.
because real estate agents are modern day marketers. And now the way that yes, there are, you can do creative things like we were talking about with postcards, and, you can get creative with it. But in order to really differentiate yourself between all of the other agents and to make a living and full time, I think you have to know a little bit about marketing and social media and have a good eye for design and be creative. You have to do all and be a therapist,
Well, it has to be relevant. That's
Yeah.
what I always say. Have whatever communication form has to be relevant. Well, so why don't you give me a little bit of you have a lot of websites and domains and
Yeah.
LinkedIn, and so what is the best way for people to find you?
You can subscribe to my YouTube channel, because I think I'm close to getting 1,000 followers. I don't know what that means. Probably nothing, but yeah, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. My contact info is on there.
What is your YouTube channel?
It's Exploring the South Coast.
Okay.
Yep.
And what about a Facebook business page?
Yep. Tides Real Estate Group on Facebook, Instagram, all that. And yeah, all my contact info is there.
Well, and sellers, why should a seller use you? What do sellers need to know of why they use you?
Because I hands down know a lot more about digital marketing than I think people, in the area do. And I have a visual, my mind is very visual. I'm not the type of person that knows how to read lines and lines of code, but I am able to look at a photograph and know and pinpoint the little details and that make a difference. And so much so to the point, like, you said you have a drone company. I have a drone as well. I started taking all of my own photos because I was so particular about the way that things looked. And, that comes from even when you're consulting with a seller to get the listing live, having them touch up the little things that need to be done. There's so many different parts of the process where you have to be visually you have to be focused on those little details. And that's one thing that I am very consistent with throughout the process from beginning to end.
So just so you know, I did start a drone business when I was in one of the first training courses into when the FA, but my problem is my background is advertising. So when it came to the drone part is the easiest part. Putting it together is the hard part. And it was taking too long. So now I just use companies and they can give me the files and I can edit it further to make it more relevant.
Yeah.
Especially if there's history behind the house, I can do that to improve. But they can do the drone, the floor plan, the photos, for $300. Well, it would take me much longer to do that, and so, but I still go past what they give me,
Yep. Yep.
It's needed. Okay, well, thank you for coming. It was great knowing you.
Yeah,
One
nice
thing,
to meet you.
I can do a little quick thing. Do you do a lot of waterfronts down there?
Yeah, I live
On the water?
I can see the water from not from where I'm sitting right now, but if I move it
I don't
down,
know. Do you see the water behind
I
me?
do. Yep. Yep.
That's my little lake. I harvest ice out there.
Yep.
I've sold properties in more different lakes than any agent. This is my little bling.
Oh, hold on, hold it higher. Let me see. Awesome. Yeah, we live in a town called Dartmouth, Massachusetts, but there's a little village that I live in called Paidnaram Village, and Paidnaram Harbor has been voted the best harbor in the US, year
Wow.
after year by usharbors.com. And it's truly it's a magical place and I love it.
Are there big things that people need to know about selling a waterfront there? I mean, it's title for one. There's setbacks, things like septic and
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just what type of lifestyle do you want? Are you showy? Do you want something that's remote and private? Because there are some gated communities that are, where families have been coming for generations and generations who don't like new people coming in. So I think it all depends on their personality and trying to figure out, what is it that they really want in a waterfront property.
are you running into more problems or challenges with towns and short-term rentals?
Not here because it's such a big part of our it's such a big part of our economy that, I don't know if that, there so far no.
Okay, well, that's good. I find in general, B&Bs or the towns were starting to say, well, you can't have all these Airbnbs because it's going to affect the hotel business. I think there's no relevance because somebody who needs a house isn't going to have 4 rooms in a hotel.
Definitely.
But I can understand the issues that arise from if you have a house in a neighborhood and now it's a commercial entity and new people are coming in every week. We'll see where that all goes. Yeah. And this year's market is a little strange, I think, because there's probably not too much chaos going on in the world, but definitely affecting.
Yeah, I found that a lot of, if you're looking at the upper wealth, the upper end, I feel like a lot of people are holding on to their money and being a little bit more cautious than prior years. But yeah, still really steady here.
Yep. Okay. Well, good. Well, thanks. It was nice meeting you, Molly.
Yeah,
I
nice
really
to meet you.
appreciate it. I learned something a little bit from everybody I talked to. I'm hoping that this helps people understand what we do, for one, and the issues are universal of what we deal with as agents. Doesn't matter where you are, and I can tell that you like what you do. That's good.
I do.
Yep.
Thank you so much thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to the Waterfront Agent Podcast. I'll be back with some more stories, tips, and expert interviews, and hopefully some humor. So make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next episode.